Casey Rowan stood quietly on the deck of the USS Valiant, the briny breeze tugging at her cropped chestnut hair. At 32, she was a highly decorated Navy SEAL lieutenant commander, lean, sharp-eyed, and unshakable. Her team revered her not just for her precision under fire, but for her uncanny ability to turn chaos into order. She'd led covert ops in hostile waters, disarmed bombs with mere seconds to spare, and once swam 7 miles through a hurricane to save a stranded squadmate. To the world, Casey was a ghost. Her missions classified, her name only a whisper in the Pentagon's marble corridors. But today she was home. Home in Norwich, Virginia, on a rare leave of absence. For once, she traded her fatigues for jeans, boots, and a well-worn leather jacket that had seen better days. Her plan was simple: a burger at Manny's Diner, a cold beer, and an entire evening of mindless TV. Simple pleasures for a woman who had seen too much. As she walked down Granby Street, the evening buzz felt foreign but oddly comforting. Civilians laughed, cars rolled by, and shop windows glowed with neon signs. She slipped her hands into her jacket pockets, ready to disappear into normalcy, if only for a night. That's when a police cruiser screeched to a halt beside her. Casey Rowan, the officer barked as he stepped out. His badge gleamed under the orange streetlights. She turned, her hazel eyes cool, assessing. "That's me." Officer Nathan Whitaker was a brute of a man, all thick shoulders and a buzz cut that screamed control freak. His sneer didn't hide the malice in his eyes. "You're under arrest," he said, snapping cold steel cuffs around her wrists. "For what?" Casey's voice stayed level, her pulse steady. "Assault with a deadly weapon," Whitaker said, tightening the cuffs until metal bit into her skin. "Witnesses saw you stab a man down at Pier 11. Casey didn't flinch. "I've been on a ship for 3 months. "Tell it to the judge," Whitaker sneered as he shoved her into the back of his cruiser. Her instinct screamed, "Trap," but she stayed silent. Panic was a rookie mistake, and Casey Rowan wasn't a rookie. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and despair. Whitaker's story hardened like poured concrete, a detailed, airtight account of Casey knifing a dock worker named Eduardo Eddie Cray. The evidence piled up like bricks in a wall: a bloodied knife with her prints, a blurry photo of a woman in a jacket like hers, and a witness swearing he'd seen it all. It was impossible. It was also perfect. Too perfect. Casey sat cuffed to a cold metal table, watching Whitaker smirk from across the room. "You're finished, Rowan," he said, leaning in close enough for her to smell his sour breath. "Nobody's buying your innocent act." She studied him like she'd studied targets in hostile zones. His jaw ticked, sweat gleamed at his hairline, and his nostrils flared every time he exhaled. He was nervous, overcompensating. "This isn't random," she said quietly. "Who's pulling your strings, Whitaker?" His face darkened, and he slammed his fist on the table. "Shut your mouth and sign the confession." She didn't move. Not a chance. He stormed out, leaving her with a public defender who looked barely old enough to shave. "They've got you dead to rights," the kid stammered, pushing his glasses up his nose. "You should plea out. 5 years is better than." "Give me a phone," Casey said flatly. He hesitated, then slid her a burner phone under the table. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Marcus," she said when the line picked up. "It's Rowan. I'm in deep." Chief Petty Officer Marcus Briggs was a retired SEAL, now working as a private investigator. He'd trained Casey in BUD/S, taught her how to think when everything else ran out, including bullets and time. "Where?" Marcus rasped. "Norwich PD. They framed me. Say no more." By the next morning, Marcus was there, grizzled and broad, his salt and pepper beard doing little to soften the scars of his past. He walked with a limp from an IED in Fallujah, but still moved like a predator. They met in the visitation room. His steel-gray eyes swept over her like a tactical scan. "Whitaker's dirty," he said, sliding a manila folder under the glass. "Been on the take for years, drugs, extortion. But this is personal." Casey flipped through grainy photos of Whitaker shaking hands with men in tailored suits. Who are they? Vincent Calder, Marcus said. Shipping magnate. Owns half the docks. Runs product for the cartels under the radar. And he doesn't like loose ends. Why me? She asked, frowning. I've got no enemies here. Marcus shook his head. You do now. They released Casey 2 days later. Marcus had posted her bail, and with a push from his contacts, they poked enough holes to delay the DA's steamroll. But she knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. They holed up in Marcus's safe house, a tiny, musty apartment overlooking the harbor. From there, they dug, and dug deep. Vincent Calder's web stretched wide. He bought loyalty with cash, fear, or both. And Whitaker was his errand boy. There's a gala tomorrow night, Marcus said, tossing her a sleek black dress. Calder's hosting. Crash it. Get close. Casey smirked. Undercover's my thing. The gala was a shimmering illusion. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and fake smiles. Calder held court in a white tuxedo, his shark-like grin gleaming under the lights. Casey slipped through the crowd, a shadow in silk. She spotted Whitaker near the bar, whispering into Calder's ear. His face was pale, drawn. Good. Let him sweat. She charmed a server into spilling gossip. Calder was paranoid. Lately, more than usual. He raged about someone costing him millions. A ghost. Could it be her? A mission off Colombia? She'd torched a cartel freighter 2 years ago. Had Calder been behind it? She edged closer to Calder. Overheard his words. Fix it, he hissed. Whitaker nodded. I'll bury her. An ally emerged where Casey least expected. Elena Cray, Eddie's sister. A wiry bartender with stormy eyes and a heart full of fire. She cornered Casey in the ladies' room. You didn't kill my brother, Elena spat. Whitaker did, and he's covering it up. Casey's expression hardened. Why me? Eddie saw something. Shipping logs. Drugs. Whitaker killed him to keep it quiet. They needed a scapegoat. You were convenient. Elena shoved a USB drive into Casey's hand. This is Eddie's backup, she said. Use it. The USB was a goldmine. Names, dates, shipments, all tying Calder to a cartel. Eddie had been a whistleblower, not just a victim. And Whitaker's frame job was a last-ditch move to protect his boss. They planned carefully. The trial was in 3 days. Casey decided it wouldn't be a trial. It would be a reckoning. But Calder's men struck first. A black SUV rammed the safe house at dawn. Bullets shredded the walls. Casey dove for cover, dragging Marcus behind the couch. She returned fire with a stolen Glock. Marcus grabbed a shotgun and blasted the door frame into splinters. By the time the attackers fled, 2 were dead on the floor. One gasped the name before dying. Calder. The courtroom was a media circus. Reporters lined the halls. Gawkers craned for a glimpse of the woman accused of murder. Casey sat in an orange jumpsuit, cuffs on her wrists. Whitaker smirked on the stand, weaving his story like a spider spinning silk. The prosecution laid out their ironclad case. When it was Casey's turn, she stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Your Honor, she said, locking eyes with the judge. I'm moved to represent myself. Judge Hardro's brow arched. You sure about that, Miss Rowan? Dead sure, Casey said. And she dismantled Whitaker's lies like defusing a bomb. Chain of custody errors. Photos timestamped while she was deployed. Navy logs. Marcus testified. Elena testified. Then Casey dropped the hammer. I'm not just Casey Rowan, she said. I am Lieutenant Commander Casey Rowan. 12 years with the U.S. Navy SEALs. I don't stab dock workers. I save lives. The room erupted. Then she played the audio files from the USB, Calder ordering Eddie's murder. Whitaker agreeing to clean it up. The judge slammed her gavel as FBI agents stormed the courtroom. Whitaker bolted, but the agents tackled him before he made it 3 steps. Calder's name echoed in the chaos. Casey's charges were dropped that afternoon. She stepped out into the light, free, but not done. Word came down. Calder had fled. He was holed up on a yacht off the coast, plotting revenge. Casey didn't hesitate. With Marcus and Elena at her side, they commandeered a speedboat, chased Calder into the night. The storm raged. Waves slammed the hull. But Casey was back in her element. Water was her domain, and justice was her mission. They boarded the yacht as lightning lit the sky. Guns barked. Calder's guards fell. Casey's training made it surgical. She found Calder on the deck. The storm drenched them both. His tuxedo was soaked and torn. His smugness was gone. "You're the ghost," he spat. "Operation Nightfall. You sank my freighter." Casey's memory flickered. A mission 2 years back. She hadn't known it was his. "You framed me," she said coldly. "You tried to erase me. You cost me everything," he roared, lunging. She disarmed him, slammed him to the deck. "Now you've lost more." Calder and Whitaker were sentenced to life. Their empire crumbled. Casey returned to Norwich, not as a ghost, but a hero. The Navy reinstated her. Medals gleamed on her uniform again. Elena opened a bar in Eddie's name. Marcus toasted Casey with a grin. "Told you, kid," he said. "Unbreakable." Casey smiled. She had faced the abyss, fought a broken system, and won, not just for herself, but for every soul crushed by lies. The tide had turned, and she was its unstoppable force.